Welcome, everyone. This is the Dead Rabbit Society. I am Pete, and I'm joined by my co-host, B. This is the brand new podcast from the Salty Boys production company, and we're going to take a deep look into the society that we live in the world we think we know.
It's the entrance to the rabbit hole, man. Welcome to the rabbit hole. There's a lot of things I want to get off my chest, man. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world right now. We don't really know what to believe. We don't know what's real. We don't know what's not real. And I kind of just want to take it to a scientific place to begin with. Every day we're bombarded with this technology. It makes you kind of wonder, like, you know, you and I, Pete, we've been alive for almost 40 years. I'm 37. I think you're, 39?
Yeah, I'll be 40 pretty soon.
So we're in this kind of bridge generation where we were alive before technology really took over. You know, like, we were in this bridge generation between our parents and the new generation, where our parents, they really didn't have much technology at all besides radio and television. And, you know, we kind of watched it all evolve before our very eyes, from computers that could barely hold any information. You know, remember the old floppy disk computers that held less than a megabyte per disk. And now we're talking about multiple gigabytes of frequency being transmitted every day. And it's just this information overload, you know, and it's kind of,
and it's all in our pocket.
Yeah. We have this little device that access all human information. And how have we gone this far in 30 years since the, you know, technology's really, you know, gone exponentially to this whole other, like, futuristic world, to where it surpassed all of these movies that we were watching when we were kids, talking about the future. A lot of these movies have been surpassed in tech, and the tech we have now has surpassed these movies to where they're really dated, you know? So how did this happen? And what is the purpose? Why are we so bombarded with this technology? And I kind of want to start off at the building blocks, you know, the frequencies that this technology, you know, are broadcast. Like, so you look at our brains, right? And our computers kind of mimic our brains. We've created this technology that mimics our own brain. So the computer, the way the computer works is it takes in all this information of codes and whatnot, and it breaks codes down and then creates the programs that you're watching on your screen. So that's, you know, in a layman's terms, this is how it works. It takes in information, it processes it, and it pushes it back out. And this mimics the way our own brains kind of receive reality. Our brains, so when you're actually looking at something, you're perceiving light frequencies, right? So our brain actually creates that reality. What our eyes are doing is our ears listening to sound. We're actually taking in these frequencies, this information. It's just really just at the base levels, it's code. That's what a light is, energy vibrating at a frequency. So our eyes perceive this light, this frequency. It takes the light in, and then our brain processes it and spits out what our eyes actually mean. So scientists have kind of come to this conclusion that the reality is actually created by our brains. So we each have our own unique perspective on this reality because each of our brains are different. We're all perceiving this information differently. So the output of your brain is going to be different based on, you know, your own personal perceptions of reality. Does that make any sense?
No, it makes complete sense. It's your reality is based on the way you've perceived life and how you've experienced life too. It's not just everyone's life experience is different. So obviously everyone's going to see things differently in the world. Just like when you it's a classic game of telephone. You tell a story, everyone has their own version of the story that they've seen or witnessed. You never get a true account of what happens.
A perfect representation of this is memeing. You know, memes are probably at the forefront of our information at this point. People love to make memes, and you know, the old saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, the meme is like, it takes a picture and information and when I look at a meme, I'm going to perceive that meme differently than you are. I might find it funny. You might find it offensive. It's based on your own perceptions of that information. That information is benign in itself, but once it gets processed into your brain, the reaction is different based on your perception.
Mm-hmm.
So in essence, our brains are computers, but actually our computers are our version, our created synthetic version of our brain. That's what a computer is. So the way the computers process information is the same way our brains process information, and this is all scientific knowledge. Like you look at the electromagnetic spectrum, right? Our five senses perceive 0.005% of the electromagnetic spectrum. So our five sense reality, essentially, the way I like to analyze it is if you had a radio that only broadcast 5 out of 100,000 frequencies or radio stations. That's what our bodies are. Our bodies can only perceive 5 out of 100,000 radio stations, so we're only privy to this small bandwidth of frequency, but everything that we're processing, everything's frequencies, everything's natural frequencies by our five senses, the light, the sound, the taste, the touch. These are all frequencies. It's energy vibrating at a frequency. And I have a quote from the father of quantum physics. He's a Nobel Prize winner, Planck. I believe it was the 30s that he discovered, right? So his quote is, "All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particle of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter." So energy at a quantum level is particles, right? And what scientists discovered about light is that light has multiple properties, right? It can either be a wave or it can be a particle. And light is a wave when it's not observed. Light becomes a particle because of observation. And that's a key thing to really delve into. It seems like a benign statement just to the layman, but you really need to wrap your mind around this, right? So light when it's not observed is a fucking wave. When it's something observes it, it's a particle. It changes. So observation changes reality. Observation changes light. So if you look at that and you really digest that fact, right? Our power of observation creates reality. It changes reality. So that old saying of if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? The answer is only if there's something there to perceive that frequency of sound. So if that tree falls in the forest and there's no recording device, there's no biological creature to hear that sound, it doesn't exist. It never makes that sound because in order for these sounds and light to exist, it must be observed.
Yeah, but
it's a really heavy. Yeah. Go ahead.
In that instance, though, there's always something biological to hear it, just maybe not human. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I've always found that quote interesting because of the fact that it's almost egotistical to think that it has to be a human that experiences it. No, the force is full of animals and biologics that would hear it no matter. These don't understand it on what level it would be on. Yeah, but that's totally not your point. But I'm just No,
I know what you're saying. But think about our reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be something to process the frequencies. Energy is just matter vibrating at a frequency. So there's all these natural frequencies out there, light, sound. These are natural frequencies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now let's talk about technology. Technology consists of frequencies. We got radio frequencies, TV frequencies, bombarding us all day, internet frequencies, fizzle jizzle. I'm not going to say the actually, because we're going to get banned if I say anything that has to do with the letter before H and the number after 4.
Something it rhymes with Smiveg.
Smive B.
Smiveg B.
So you think about these frequencies, right? And they're just kicking up. They're creating this frequency soup constantly, where we have our base reality, our 5 sense reality out there. It's like a simulation. It's a broadcast. This natural frequency of light and sound, etc., that's out there. And now with the proliferation of technology over the last, let's say 100 years, because 100 years ago we still had horses and fucking buggies. 120 years ago, we're in horse and buggy territory. Now, 120 years later, we have all this crazy technology. So before all these new frequencies, radio and TV and all that shit, all we had was the 5 sense reality, the frequencies of natural light, the natural frequencies. Now you fast forward 120 years later, and we literally are bombarded with frequency soup every day, and most of it is synthetically generated. So what is the significance of this? I'm not a scientist. I propagate a lot of information. I look into everything. I read. I want to know. That's just my nature. I'm a curious human being. I don't like accepting everything that's told to me. So I look. I read. I delve into these rabbit holes. And I'm not one of those conspiracy nuts that believes every little thing that's told that I read. I want to get multiple sources. I really like my research consists of constant checking and rechecking of facts and sources, and this is I have my perception of reality, and I in no way want to invalidate anybody else's perception, or I think the worst position to take is to call people stupid because they don't know things, and that's kind of where we're at right now in society. They divided us down this ideological line in the sand, and everyone to be thinking binary, like you're either left or you're right, and then we're building towards this big conflict eventually, and essentially that's what it's all about. But getting back to the frequencies, you think about it, and I don't want to get too into religion or anything. I personally believe that there is an intelligent mind behind this. Like Max Planck was saying, there's a mind behind the matrix. If we're in a construct, if you're in a simulation, something had to create that simulation. There has to be some kind of entity behind it all. That's from all my experience, and I grew up in a Lutheran school. I was kind of disenfranchised by the church from an early age. So I set out to try to prove the church wrong and find as much information I could to try to disprove God. And all I really found was more and more evidence that there is an intelligent mind behind this. And I think science proves it. And quantum physics specifically, you're looking at things on a particle level. There appears to be, according to the guy who founded quantum physics, there seems to be an intelligent mind that's controlling things. But that's kind of going off on a tangent. I really want to focus on the frequency stuff. Like, so the natural light, think of it coming from a natural source like the sun. We have a lot of unnatural light in our lives between TV screens and lights. So where's this other frequency, this false frequency coming from, and what does it want? I don't want to get too much into like the world conspiracy, because I feel like that's another rabbit hole we can look into at times, but there really is a lot of lots to be said for natural versus unnatural frequencies, and what the unnatural frequencies are kind of culling us towards this goal. And now with the virus and everything that's happening, it's kind of showing its hand. You got Bill Gates going everywhere talking about how we need a vaccine and a certificate of vaccine and possible microchips and quantum tattoos. People have been talking about and warning about this future for a long, long time. There's a lot of people out there, William Cooper's, who wrote Behold a Pale Horse, which is largely considered by the conspiracy community to be like the conspiracy Bible. It really, I don't remember. I'm pretty sure I read, 15, 20 years ago when I was just getting into that hole around the time 9/11 happened. And you look back at his work or like some of David Icke's early work, and it really does kind of expose everything that's happened over the last 20 years. They really knew, somehow they knew what the plan was. They were trying to get this information out there, and now this plan is right in our face. They want a biological or biometrics. The biometrics are microchip implants or tattoos, the barcode, and you think about the conspiracy or the frequency soup that we're in right now, and then you add this biometrics to people, whether it be microchips or virtual reality headsets. Have you seen the stuff they're doing in China with the kids, where they wear these halos on their head that read their brainwaves? You seen this shit?
I did see a guy who was wearing the guy who did the movie Super Size Me. Mm-hmm. He had a TV show for a while, and he was talking about, he did an episode about transcendence, putting your conscious into a robot. And there was a guy who walked around with one of those things on that read his brainwaves on a daily basis because he was preparing for the afterlife, where he was going to be uploaded into an AI machine and live forever. I haven't seen the Chinese thing, but he was in, I think it was in China or Thailand that he was doing this.
Yeah, so the Chinese have this technology right now. They have it on their school children. I watched a video the other day. They have they're little halos that go around your head, and it's really focused right here on your third eye, on your pineal gland. This is where the brainwave reader is reading the exporting of brainwaves from the center of your head, or the pineal gland. In mystical circles, it's called the third eye. So this technology is really getting kicked up to this next level, and I feel like we need to really look at where is the motivation to push it this way coming from. I really feel like I don't know if you want to call them aliens. I don't really think they're aliens. There's beings, there's non-human entities here that have been controlling things since the beginning. You look at any ancient text, any ancient culture, their ancient texts all talk about gods or mystical beings or jinn, or every different civilization from thousands of years ago is talking about these mystical beings that are non-human, that are, the Annunaki and the Sumerian texts are talking about, they seeded this planet to create, basically slaves to mine gold for them. That's basically, the Sumerian texts are pretty interesting if anyone wants to delve into those. But the bottom line is, I personally, through all my research, I feel like there is a non-human entity that is driving human society. And if you look at the frequency stuff, they've really, with technology over the past 50 to 100 years, they've overlaid this synthetic layer of frequencies over the natural frequencies of light and sound. We've got this all-encompassing technological, basically prison that's been concocted and placed over the natural reality. And it's really becoming more and more like the Matrix, to where there's this false light and false reality that we consume every day through technology that's kind of distorting our actual reality. It's really crazy to see how far it's come just in my lifetime, and the proliferation of this technology is not by accident, because ultimately there are goals. If you look at like the UN and, the people that run the world, they've put out into the public, like what their plans are. You got Agenda 2030, Agenda 21, and they have clear stated goals of where they want to take society. And it all involves this all-encompassing technology. They want to make, the fizzle jizzle, the jive bee. It's going to be all-encompassing. It's going to be even more of a frequency soup than it was before with 3G or 4G. It's gonna be a fully interactive synthetic layer over the actual reality. And this is and you got to think of what are the long-term ramifications to our body. Even like you look over the last 100 years since this technology has become proliferated, and the rise in cancer rates over the last 100 years, all this different stuff. So what is it doing to our bodies to be bombarded with frequency soup every day? What is it doing? And big pharma has kind of controlled this narrative of, where the cancers come from. But it's pretty freaking obvious if you really do any research that it's the technology. A lot of these cancers are caused by the radiation from these technologies, these frequencies that we're constantly bombarded with every single day. And it started back when they started the radio waves. The Spanish flu epidemic broke out around the same time that the national radio began. So a lot of people don't want to equate this virus with any kind of technology, but at the very least, it's worth looking at what it's done to our immune systems over the last 100 years, looking at that Spanish flu outbreak and the correlation with the proliferation of radio technology and how the outbreak kind of broke out at the same time. So I'm not saying that the technology is causing the viruses, but it's very possible the technology is lowering our immune system so that we're more susceptible and weakened to them.
Well, cancer clusters are a real thing near power lines. It's been proven that these are real things.
Yeah, exactly. And all of this information's out there that pretty much these smoking guns exist everywhere. But the problem is the control of information. The control of information is very prevalent. And we've seen it turn up to Gestapo levels in the last month and a half, to where censorship of information has just become widespread. And it's kind of been they just kind of shake it off oh no, it's just because we need real information and the dangers of misinformation, and they justify it and by saying, the danger of misinformation. But at the meantime, who's the one who's determining the validity of information? Especially with the virus right now, you've got hundreds of doctors and scientists, medical professionals, hundreds are coming out and saying this isn't right. This is not immunologists are saying our immune systems, this is not how to care for our immune systems. Locking down healthy people is only going to destroy immune systems collectively. Our collective immune system, it needs you need to be constantly around these threats so that your immune system fights them off and stays strong. And we're kind of sheltering ourselves away from any kind of threats to our immune system. We're constantly cleaning and destroying any threats to our immune system. Meanwhile, the immune system is weakening, and like I said, I'm not a scientist. I don't want people to think I'm trying to tell them about science, but this is just from experts that I've looked into talking about immunology, and there's so much information out there that disputes what's happening and disputes the mainstream narrative, and they're all being silenced. And we're supposed to adhere to these WHO guidelines, and the WHO's been wrong since the beginning. And it's either been through complete misinformation or outright lying, And
the WHO is nothing. The WHO is a political party.
Yeah,
disguised as as a professional group that's helping us with medical knowledge.
They're tied to China. They've been the Chinese apologists since the beginning, And I'm not saying that this is all China, to blame on China, you know, like there's plenty of blame to go around, but the major players are the ones who are getting the most publicity as the ones to listen to, you know, the Dr. Fauci's and Bill Gates. Like, why? Bill Gates has no medical degree. He's not even, you know, he stole the code for Windows from Apple or whoever, you know, he didn't even create his wealth is completely fraudulent, created off of a fraud. Who the hell is this guy to be telling us what to do with our bodies or to be setting policies on medical, you know, science? Like, the dude is not a scientist. He's not a freaking doctor. He's just a freaking dude that stole a bunch of code and got rich. And now he's got power and influence because he's rich, you know, and he's funding all these vaccines. And you look into his vaccine history and it's shady as fuck. You know, it's stuff he did in India and the stuff he did with the HPV vaccine in Africa. Like, this dude is scandalous and it's scary, dude. He's like a Bond villain. And this is the dude we're fucking listening to. Like, the stuff with Fauci is like a smoking gun, man. I don't know if you know about this stuff or you read about it, but it's starting to come out, filter like slowly into the mainstream that this motherfucker was doing all kinds of research at Fort Detrick. And in 2014, this research at the Fort Detrick lab, they do a lot of biological research there. The CIA's done MK Ultra research at Fort Detrick. It's really like the center of, you know, government conspiracy research, where the biological or psychological, they do all kinds of wild shit at Fort Detrick. Anyway, so Fauci was at Fort Detrick doing research on the coronavirus, creating chimeras to, for whatever fucking reason, you know, he's doing all this biological research on the coronavirus and creating hybrid coronavirus chimeras, at Fort Detrick. And then the U.S. bans his research in 2014. So what does he do? He takes money from U.S. taxpayers and grants. He takes all this money and he outsources the research to Wuhan. Right? So now Wuhan is doing coronavirus chimeric research where they're splicing shit and making all kinds of fucking monster viruses. And then, you know, one of the main focuses on their research was bat to human transmission, right? So they're taking these viruses and they're putting them through bats and seeing if they can make a situation where it jumps to a human, right? So this is the fucking research they're doing. And lo and behold, the official narrative is that it came from a bat at a wet market. So, okay. And then the major player, the guy who's standing in front of the cameras on the media telling us what to do with this virus, is the one who's been fucking doing coronavirus chimera research in Wuhan, you know, and it's just so much. This is a rabbit hole, man. Like, you need to look into this stuff. Like, the dude that's telling us what to do could very well be the one that created this whole situation, you know? And it's wild that this hasn't been, you know, propagated. This information has not been given to the public to really look at, because why are we listening to this guy if he's the one that created the virus, you know? Like, and, you know, I'm not going to make conspiracy claims that it was done on purpose, or, you know, but just the fact that this research he was doing was on a coronavirus. It looks like this coronavirus is some kind of mutated version of the flu that we normally get. So and then I don't know if you've seen this, but there's this French virologist. He's a Nobel Prize winning French virologist, right? This dude won the Nobel Prize for discovering HIV. He is at the forefront of virology. His expertise is exceptional in this field. He knows what the fuck he's talking about, right? So he looks at this virus and he says it has properties of HIV. So you think about it, like, and the French media, the media is trying to make this guy look like a conspiracy theorist. But who is more apt and qualified to make such a statement than the dude who discovered fucking HIV? You know? But meanwhile, this guy's being discredited as a conspiracy theorist when he's the fucking expert in the field. So, you know, you got all these people on the internet saying, oh, we got to believe science. Let's listen to scientists and this and that. But all these scientists that are pointing stuff out and trying to whistleblow, they're all being discredited, and so you look at how this virus, who this virus targets, who it hits the hardest, hits the elderly, hits people with that are immunocompromised. What does HIV do? You don't die from HIV.
No, you die
from pneumonia. You die from some other thing, because what the HIV. What's that?
No, what you're saying is, no, you're completely right. What they do is, you don't die of HIV. You die from complications from something else you get while having HIV, which is very similar to this COVID-19. But what the funny part is they're not telling you that. What they're doing is they're just telling you that people are dying from COVID-19, not the fact that people are dying from pneumonia or heart disease or diabetes after getting COVID-19.
That's the key to the whole thing, and I think there's a correlation here, right, between HIV and this virus. And the fact that the guy who discovered the fucking virus is saying this has properties of HIV, right? So look at how HIV works, right? When you have AIDS, autoimmune deficiency syndrome, right? I think that's what the acronym stands for.
Yeah.
So the AIDS virus, HIV, it goes into your immune system and it basically turns it against itself, right? And that's why people die from other shit, because their immune system is basically going haywire and fighting itself. And you don't die from the virus, you die from the cause, which is, it's just the aftermath of what the HIV virus does. You look at the people who are dying from this virus, it's basically the same thing. The thing goes in there, it causes your immune system to go haywire to where it starts attacking healthy cells. And then you got the HIV discoverer, the scientist that discovered it, saying it's spliced with HIV. So if this thing came about organically and is natural, then why is it exhibiting properties of HIV? And why is this guy saying it's spliced with HIV? It's just wild, man. It's wild, all this information that's coming out. And then you got Fauci, the spokesman for the WHO, is the guy who may have created it. I don't want to say any of what I'm saying is solidly based facts. It's just information. Like, information is all benign, right? All I'm doing is I'm giving you the information that I've come across. If you want to go and fact check it and double check and be my guest, it's out there. Go look into this stuff. It's fucking out there. And you find the information for yourself, digest that information and make your own determination. Make your own determination about what is happening. But I know there's a lot of information that's dumping out of my mind right now. There's a lot of things that I'm probably saying that maybe you're not familiar with. So I kind of want to give you some context, especially when it comes to the frequency stuff, the interaction of our minds with frequencies. There's a few experiments that I find very interesting that kind of change the way that we should be looking at reality. One of them in particular, if you Google the phantom DNA effect or phantom DNA experiment, and scroll down to an article from medium.com, it's called 3 Experiments That Change Everything. It talks about these 3 experiments that they did with DNA. And what the phantom DNA experiment was done in Moscow, the Russian Academy of Sciences, by biologist Vladimir Poponin and his colleague Peter Gariev. So what they did in this experiment is they took photons, light particles, and they put them in a vacuum tube, and they took a picture. And what they found was what they expected. The photons were spread haphazardly all over the place, because that's what light does. It bounces off things. It's everywhere. The photons of light, they bounce off everything, and they're everywhere, right? So that their first stage of the experiment was exactly what they expected. And then what they did was they introduced biological material, DNA, into the vacuum tube with the photons, and they took a picture. And what they found kind of blew their minds, and it kind of changed what they thought about photons and DNA. What they saw was the photons align themselves along the DNA strand. And, they're like, oh crap, what's going on here? It kind of showed some correlation and some effect, that DNA has an effect on photons of light, right? So the next stage of the experiment is they extracted the DNA back outside of the vacuum tube, and then they took a picture again, and they expected to find these photons back to the original position they were at in the first picture, which is all over the place. But what they found was basically the crux of the entire experiment, that their result of the experiment, they saw that the photons stayed in the same position as if the DNA was still there. So the DNA not only affected the photons, the organization of the photons of light, it directly affected them. Once you retracted the DNA, the photons stayed in there as if the DNA was still there. So not only did they affect the DNA or affect the photons while the DNA was present, once the DNA was retracted, they stayed in the same position. So in a way, they were still connected to that DNA. So it kind of, basically the result they came to is like our DNA causes a reaction to photons. Biological material causes a reaction to photons. It's a really mind-blowing experiment. Like, if you really think about the ramifications of that, our DNA, our biological stuff that we're made of, has a direct impact upon photons of light. So that kind of goes back to what I was saying in the first half. Like, our observation of light changes light. It changes it from a wave to a particle, and it's really crazy stuff. I'm not a scientist, so I can't really like delve into the minutia of what that means ultimately, but it's a very interesting experiment to look into yourselves. There's another experiment that it talks about in this article where they took DNA of a subject and they isolated it, and then they had the subject, they performed different stimuli on the subject. They made him watch videos, erotic videos, violent videos, and they recorded the reaction of the DNA, and the DNA was recording based on emotional stimuli, even though it wasn't still in his body. And they did this. They first started with the DNA in another room, then they took it to like 350 feet away until as much as 350 miles away, and recorded the response of the DNA to these stimuli. And they had a quantum clock on it, and they discovered that the reaction of the DNA was instantaneous to the emotional stimuli. So even though the DNA was no longer a part of his body, it still was connected to him through the energy field, this energy field that's underlying everything, the energy field that's pumping out these frequencies that we download with our senses. There's an energy field underlying everything. And that's kind of goes back to what the Max Planck quote that I gave. And it's coincidentally, I found this article when we were on break, and it has the exact same quote I was talking about earlier. This article on medium.com about these experiments, it has the exact quote from Max Planck I was referring to. So it was kind of like weird coincidental thing where I find this article and it's talking about the same quote that I quoted earlier. It's really kind of synchronistic, you know? But yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing, the science that's out there that we're not privy to. Like, I never knew this stuff before I actually found it on the internet. But these are real studies that have been done, and the results of these studies should have really changed our perception of reality. But instead, science has kind of swept this information a little bit under the rug, so that we don't really understand our connection to this reality. And that's ultimately what they want. And it goes back to what I was saying about this false frequency that's been overlaid over the actual frequency of reality. There is a force at work here that is trying to disconnect you from disconnect you from who you really are, what your body is really capable of, what your body is basically how it connects to our reality. It's definitely that there's an underlying field of energy beneath this reality that interconnects all of us. And there's just profound things about this reality that we are kind of kept in the dark about. This is not stuff that they teach you every day, but it's information that's logged in the annals of science. So why aren't they telling us all this information that's pretty groundbreaking as far as our perception of what humanity is and what this reality is? And the answer, I think, is that it's because there's a false reality being propagated that they want you to buy into. And that's what the technology is all about, is creating this false reality of the internet. Like the internet is all encompassing these days with social media. We are digesting this internet reality that's put out there every day, this false reality that's been laid over our real reality. And it's only getting more and more encompassing. It's only getting more and more draconian, the way this technology is taking over our biology. In the grand scheme of things, this technology is taking over our biology. And you really look at the agendas at play here, and it's a promotion of transhumanism. They're selling us this next step in evolution as humans merging with technology and transhumanism. And it's really telling, if you really delve into these things, why they're doing it. They want to circumvent our biology. They want to circumvent this actual reality that we're downloading in our brains and replace it with this synthetic version of it. It's basically a false god that's been created, and there's a force behind it that I don't want. Like I said, I don't want to get too much into religious stuff, talking about Satan or anything like that. But if there was a Satan, this is exactly what he would try to do to try to become God. He would try to circumvent the God's reality and create his own. And ultimately, if you look into the people that run the world, they answer to this energy, this force behind the false reality that is being created. And ultimately, the end game is to completely lock you down into this false reality, so that you're not you're only downloading the false reality. And I know it's kind of heavy stuff. It's really, it's kind of like woo-woo type of stuff that is a little bit, I don't want to say conspiracy theory stuff, but it's definitely beyond the scope of what we look at in our daily lives. We've kind of been simplified as creatures. We're kind of these creatures that just we're running on our base desires and our base function, which is eat, fuck, and basically go to sleep and repeat. We're being designed to run on our base desires, on our base instincts, and we aren't really able to look beyond at what our full potential is really meant to be as human beings and what this reality actually is. And I feel like that's the ultimate goal of this false reality, is to inhibit humanity from ever figuring out what he is and what is our purpose here.
So in essence, they've slowed down our evolution of people.
Yes. It's controlling information. Look at the control of information these days. Everything, the CIA created that term conspiracy theorist. Mm-hmm. And it was around the time of JFK's assassination. They were trying to discredit the very real possibility that this was a conspiracy to kill a man who was trying to expose the very people that ended up killing him. Mm-hmm. So the CIA created this term conspiracy theorist so that they could blanket demonize information that they didn't want the public to consume.
Well, false information's always been a thing that government has used. It's easier to give out misinformation and have people think one way than to just try to explain what's going on. You'd rather have a false belief than a real belief.
Well, just look at politics these days, right? Like everything is on this binary scale. Like look at the virus. If you want them to open society back up, you're being branded a right wing. You know, if you want to stay inside and remain safe and wait this thing out, then you're left wing. So like anybody, and they're dividing people based on this binary sense of, oh, there's only two ways to look at this. When in reality, it's all gray. You know, we don't live in a black and white world. We live in fucking shades of gray. You know, but the more they can, it's easier to control two points of view, two perspectives than it is to control a million. So if they can get the vast majority of people on this binary thinking where it's either black or white or Democrat or Republican, you know, like then it's a lot easier to control everybody, because then you're only controlling two perspectives. You know, and you and I both know, like, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican at the top, they're all working together. But the more that they can create this illusion that there's only two sides, you know, it's a lot easier to control the masses if 90% of everybody believes this you versus me shit. You know, if they can divide people on politics or race or gender or sexual orientation or whatever the fuck, it's a lot easier to just draw this line in the sand and say, okay, you labeled as this thing and you're labeled as that thing. And to get people identifying with these labels, you get people to identify with these labels, and they put themselves in the box. And then all you got to do is control the people in the box, because they don't fucking think for themselves. They start identifying as these labels. They start seeking out the information that reinforces their own labels, and then now they've degraded themselves. You know, Alan Watts was famous for his quote. He famously said something like, I don't ever label myself, because labeling myself is degrading. It's degrading your humanity if you label yourself as anything. Well, yeah, Christian, Muslim, Jew, whatever.
Well, because you're no longer an individual. You're part of a collective. Yeah. And the ultimate idea is to be an individual, not part of a collective. But people seem to think that I've had this. I've always seen that, because it's always funny when you talk about nonconformity and all these things like that, especially when you talk about like punk rock. Punk rock is so conformist, it's ridiculous. They even wear uniforms. So your individuality is never exists, because you have to be part of a collective and a collective thought to be recognized in that group of people.
Well, that's kind of the hypocrisy you see on the far left right now, is they're demonizing all these things as fascist or whatnot, but then they act like fascists, you know, and they try to intimidate through fear and you know, and to get you to basically bully you to see things their way. But they're speaking out against the very thing that you know, they're trying to categorize fascism as far right. But you know, the political spectrum is a horseshoe. It's not a line. Political spectrum, the farther you get to the extremes, the closer the extremes are to touching. You know, like far right and far left are almost the same ideology. You know, it's all about control. And ultimately, to me, you know, you talk about good and evil. I think evil, the hallmark of evil is control. You know, it's trying to control other people and make them think a certain way or act a certain way. It's like, I believe in self-determination. I want everyone to be an individual and to live their life the way they see fit. The second I try to control you into thinking the way I think, then that's where the evil comes in. Well, you know, like
you become an oppressor at that point.
Yeah. And especially once you become in the majority, you know, once the majority rules, it's easy to use fear and intimidation to get people to join the majority. You know, it's this psychological fascism where it's like intimidation and fear is used to bully people into being coerced. You know, into submission. You know, and
it goes in steps. First, they divide you, then they create groups, and then want you to since you've been divided, you feel like have this sense of you don't belong, and then all of a sudden there's a group where they want you to belong, and they're telling you all the things you want to hear that they first were telling you didn't matter. You were that you had no purpose, and then all of a sudden now you have a purpose.
Yeah, I mean, look at I mean Orwell's work in this field was pretty much the standard. George Orwell with 1984, Animal Farm. And then, Aldous Huxley with Brave New World, they kind of outlined the way that the trap is set, Animal Farm specifically it's almost prophetic in that you look at the pigs. Are you familiar with Animal Farm? Did you read it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Napoleon and Snowball, they're like, oh, well, all animals are equal. Right. And then eventually it evolved into, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And that was how the pigs set themselves apart as the leaders. It was basically the Marxist, socialist, communist playbook.
Mm-hmm.
The way the pigs followed that playbook is like they create this. They create the enemy and say, oh, this is the enemy. We need to, this is the oppressor. And then they take down the oppressor and become the oppressor themselves. And, it's pretty, for people who are still looking outside of the labels of society and today, like you see what's coming. You see how these artists, these authors tried to warn people of the trap. Like, this is the trap. This is how they set the trap. And you see the trap. It has been set in today's society with social media, like these echo chambers where people, you can't even have a debate anymore. You can't even agree to disagree on things. It becomes this violent, you against me. Like, I'm going to delete everybody who's a Trump supporter. And then all you're doing at that point is you're preaching to your own choir, and you're bouncing these same ideas off each other, and eventually you all become robots.
Well, yeah,
you're just parroting the same lines.
The echo chamber is never going to disagree with you.
Yeah, and you feel like you're a part of something. Everybody, that's part of the trap. Is every human being, although they want to be an individual, they want to feel like they're part of something. They want to have a sense of community. They obviously, friendship and love, and these are things that we crave as humans, so to play off of that urge and need, that biological urge to associate with like-minded folks, they've taken that and turned it up to 100, to where it's not just that you're communicating with like-minded folks, but you look at people who aren't like-minded as your enemy, and it's just this divisive tool that the internet has become.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I know that the frequency stuff is kind of like hard to really digest and look at, but that's basically the building blocks of what is happening. That's why I wanted to talk about it, because if you look at it in terms of frequencies, there is a very clear counterfeit frequency that has captured everyone's minds, and they've done it with technology. And you want to look. I'm trying to break it down for the scientific thinkers out there. Like, science has kind of already broken this stuff down, like to the way we perceive reality. And if you look at technology over the last 100 years and how prevalent it's become, you can kind of see, if you go back, you can kind of see this synthetic layer being constructed little by little over generations, the last 2 or 3 generations. And now you look forward to what's coming, with the next steps in technology and the transhumanism that's being promoted, and gender fluidity and androgyny, and if you're familiar with Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, I really feel like he had his finger on the pulse of what these people really want to do with society. They want to create a caste society. Are you familiar with Brave New World at all?
I've heard of it. I've never read it though.
Dude, it's probably the most influential book I've ever read in my life. Like, as far as the impact it had on my own perspective, because it kind of exposed what's coming, but it also exposed, like, you know, we're wrestling people. We know the face and the heel. The heel, the bad guy, he always thinks he's justified in his actions, right? There's always a justification for why he does the things he does in his own mind. And this goes for movies too. Like, the villain always thinks he's justified. The villain always thinks he's the good guy, you know? And that's what we have to understand about the people at the top of the pyramid, the people who are controlling this world. I think deep down, most of them believe that what they're doing is the right thing. You know, they think that they're doing good. And in this book, in Brave New World, I don't want to go too much into the plot, but it's a world that's set in the future. It's very controlled by technology, but there are people who are outside of this technological society that are like Native Americans. They're living in like reservations, right? And the people in the tech world take vacations to this reservation so they can observe the lives of the savages that live outside of the technology. And the main character, he's what's called a beta, which is basically a step. The society's structured in castes. There's alphas who are at the very top. They're at the top of the pyramid. There's betas, gamma, delta, and epsilon. Epsilon are like basically the dregs of society. They're the people that mop up shit and puke, and, you know, the bathroom cleaners. They're the bottom of the barrel. They're the bottom of society, right? And all of these people are created in labs, and they're treated with different chemicals in order to create an alpha is created in optimal settings, and the epsilons are made with basically garbage chemicals, and they create these people in a lab, and their destinies are predetermined in this technological society. If you're an epsilon, you're never going to reach alpha level. You're just going to be a cog in the machine at the bottom, right? So anyway, the main character, he's a beta. He's not quite at the top, but he works for the government, and I believe he works, I don't remember if it was science or, I might be mixing up 1984, because I know the main character in 1984 worked for the Ministry of Truth and was like a journalist or something. But anyway, so the beta, he takes this trip to the Native American lands, the savage lands, and he finds this white person and his mom there. And it turns out this lady got left in that area 20 years ago when she took her and her husband or lover at the time, had taken a vacation to the savage lands, and she got left behind for some reason. And she ended up having this child, but she still remembers the technological society. This child's grown up in the savage lands, right? So the beta takes this lady and her son back to his boss and says, "Hey, look, I found her. I found this lady that you left in the savage lands, and this child must be your son." He's not a child at this point. He's probably like 18 or something, right? So the child, he's in this society, in the technological society, they've basically locked down information. They're not allowed access to any information that existed before the technological society locked everything down. So they're not familiar with Shakespeare or any of the arts. They're very robotic in nature. So the savage comes to this technological society, and he sees that they're all kept in line with drugs, and he really sees the evils of it all, the control, absolute control that people have, that the technology has over the people. So he sets out to basically expose it, and he gets into some trouble because he tries to steal. Like, the state issues these drugs called soma that basically keeps people placated. And he goes to the soma distribution, and he starts taking people's drugs from them and saying, "Hey, this is your control mechanism. This is evil." He tries to wake people up, and he ends up getting arrested. And so before this happens, before he goes, crazy or whatever, the society has taken an interest in him because he's come from the savage lands. He's one of them that's come from the savage lands. So he becomes famous in this society for being a savage, and they get there. Everybody's interested in and everyone wants to be around him and talk to him and kind of to gawk at him, and kind of look at how stupid this guy is. He came from the savage lands, so he becomes famous. So when he gets arrested, the alpha, the leader of the whole society, basically takes him into his quarters and starts to tell him, because this guy, he's an alpha, so he's not like everybody else in the technological society. He's actually had access to the information from before, the Shakespeare's and the different writers and all the information they've deemed impermissible in their society. This guy at the top of the pyramid, he knows all of it. He understands it. And so he starts explaining to John the Savage why they created this society. And basically, in his eyes, it was to make people happy, because he looks at the society and he says, hey, look, everybody's happy with their place. Everyone's got their place. Everybody's getting drugs to make them feel good. Everyone gets to fuck whoever they want, because sex is no longer tied to procreation. It's tied to having fun, and because they make kids in a lab, so nobody has biological children anymore. There's no mother and father, like that's another reason why this guy is interesting to the tech society, because he has his mother. He has this mother figure. He has his mom, whereas all these people in this society, their mother is a biological fucking lab. So there's no. It's like the term mother has kind of been wiped from consciousness. So they're fascinated by this guy for this reason, right? So the alpha is basically telling this guy, we do this to society because it's the best way to keep it in line. And the reason why this book touched me so much, because I've been like John the Savage, I've been trying to point this out for, almost 2 decades now. Hey, look, this is coming. They're trying to control your life. There's all these different mechanisms in place to lock you down and to stop you from seeing your full humanity. But when I read that book, it made me realize the alpha was kind of right. And that's kind of sad to say, but like, some people are just happy to be ignorant. Mm-hmm. That's all they want. All they want is their bubble. They want they want their phone, they want their job, and they want their kids and their TV shows, and they're perfectly happy to live in ignorance and never explore the human connection we have to this reality and the purpose of humanity altogether. And that's ultimately what this false frequency has done to people, is it's created complacency, and it's made people to just consume and do nothing but consume. And that's the point of the false frequency altogether, is it's to disconnect you from the essence of what you are, the essence of your being, your connection to this reality and what this reality really is, So sorry, that was a long-winded explanation, but I really feel like if you're not familiar with Brave New World, it's a book you need to read, because it kind of points out what's coming. And the transhumanism that's prevalent in today's society, that's what they're conditioning us to ultimately become through, if you watch Black Mirror or any of these shows that deal with draconian technology, Westworld, you been watching Westworld at all?
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds very reminiscent of the book Brave New World. Sounds very reminiscent of Westworld. Yeah,
basically it's the same thing. Demolition Man, Westworld,
the
Black Mirror. There's so much. Go ahead.
Dystopian futures, movies, books, art is all very similar to begin with. It's a very much of an idea, and the ideology pretty much is very similar in all those different mediums. So
and ultimately there's a reason behind it. It's predictive. It's predictive programming, It's like, this is what we're concocting for you, but we're going to get you normalized to it by giving you,
movies and TV to get you more acquainted with the idea of giving up your humanity and merging with technology.
And that goes with your false frequencies. It's being embedded into us on a daily basis. I mean, it's like, I like to go back to, I believe we've had this discussion before, is that for a long time before Barack became president, you saw black presidents on TV everywhere and in movies.
Yeah.
To get you familiarize yourself with it. And they did the same thing after Barack. All you saw were female presidents. Now, the issue was that they just backed the wrong horse because Hillary Clinton it's very public of the type of person she is and the things she's done to people.
Oh, yeah.
So the fear was there before. If they had picked a different female to represent them, it probably would have worked.
Yeah, and I don't know, like, a lot of people think Trump is this renegade that got in there to just disrupt everything. But I still don't know. We're almost 4 years into Trump's presidency, and I still don't know what to think of him. You know, like, at times he seems like he's trying to help the people, and then he has the people, the people's best interest. But then again, he's out there pushing for, the technology that China has implemented already. That's super draconian. So I don't know what to think of this guy. Like, I don't know if he's just a pawn and he was put in there to divide people. And I mean, the media is complicit in that too. You look at the Trump plus media division that's been sowed over the last 4 years, and it all kind of looks like a designed plan. Mm-hmm. But I still don't know if Trump is actual opposition to the elitists, or if he's just controlled opposition, if he's just playing a role. It's really hard to kind of decipher that, and ultimately it doesn't really matter in the long run anyway, because the president's really just a figurehead to begin with.
Yeah, it's the Congress that you have to worry about because they can be there forever.
Yeah.
And they pretty much are.
And they're the ones that are interacting with these lobbyists that basically buy their loyalty, Mm-hmm. It's the Congress that puts through these laws. It's the president just signs them, he's not the one that's concocting the laws. So
no, because it's a short time position. You're only there either 4 years or 8 years. But there's congressmen and congresswomen that have been in office for 50 years.
Yeah, I mean, the president's just the facilitator of the system. The system is the Congress mm-hmm. and the Senate, and they're ultimately the ones that are bought and paid for by the elitists. They're the ones that are driving the agenda through. And like I was saying earlier, man, they're really showing their hand where they want to go in the future, and the writing is already on the wall in China. All you got to do is do a little bit of a search to find what their system is all about, their social crediting system, how there's basically surveillance cameras everywhere that are using facial recognition technology. The technology they're using in schools to read kids' brainwaves to keep them their attention. It's really crazy stuff that 20 years ago you would have said this stuff is out of science fiction, and here it is. It's fully implemented in the Chinese society, and it's coming to a theater near you. It's coming here, and it really blows my mind that people aren't waking up to what. I mean, people are waking up. But there's a vast amount of people who have no clue what this technology is capable of, and what the ramifications are going to be of implementing this technology. It's basically a full-on Big Brother world. It's Big Brother society. They're always watching you. They're always tracking you on your phone. They've been tracking us on our phones here for years. Mm-hmm. Ever since the cell phone started, they've been mining data from us, from our phones, from Facebook. They've been mining data for 15 years or whatever. The 9/11 originally opened the door to all this draconian shit. With the Patriot Act really let the NSA get away with spying on us, and it's only getting bigger and bigger, and it's almost been normalized to the point where people don't give a shit if they're getting tracked. If you go into your Google Maps has a freaking detailed history of where the fuck you've been ever since you've been using Google Maps. As long as if you're signed in on your Gmail account on Google Maps, Google knows exactly where the fuck you've been if you've taken your phone with you. They can literally track every movement, and then you couple that with that financial side of it, where you're spending your money. They know where you're going. They know what you're buying. They know everything, and now they want to kick it up a whole new notch and just completely watch us all the time and know everything. It's really like a synthetic omnipotence, which is why I was talking about the satanic thing. If Satan exists and he wants to be like God, then this system is allowing that. This system is becoming an omnipotent force where it knows everything and sees everything. And you talk about AI's implementation into society. What is controlling that AI mind? It's not human. It's not human in origin. Yet we're getting ready to turn our whole society over to AI and allowing it to control everything, which is kind of like the Westworld premise to begin with the Solomon computer. The Solomon computer was created to make to do simulations, right? That was the original. That was the original function of the Solomon computer in Westworld, was to create simulations based on data, which is what they're already doing. This what these tech companies are doing with all this data, is they're putting it into a simulator and seeing what the results are. I mean, I'm 100% sure that this virus response and everything that's going on in society right now has already been simulated. They already simulated what their response is going to be to this a billion times on a computer simulator. They've been doing this shit for fucking years, man. They've had the technology to make societal simulations on computers, and that's what they're doing. That's how they're game planning for the next steps, is through the simulating reality on reality simulators. Anyone wants to say that's a conspiracy theory, look it up, man. They've got these reality simulators. They do this. This is like, what they do. So I know anyone listening, I know this is a lot of information, and if you're not familiar with any of this, it's going to be a mind fuck. It's going to explode your brain, and you're going to be like, what the hell are these guys talking about? But, really look into this stuff. It's pretty much, the benign parts of this technology is out there for anyone to find. They have the ability to do these things, and I saw this website the other day. It's the World Economic Forum, right? You go onto the World Economic Forum website, and they're the billionaires and scientists, and they're the ones who game plan for, they call it war gaming, for future scenarios. They did one. I don't know if you're familiar with the Event 201 that happened in October, where they're war gaming in China. They're doing a war game exercise for a pandemic. Like, this is, it's kind of what the whole response to this virus has come out of that war game that they did in October. But what a great foresight they had. 2 months before the thing breaks out, they had just so happened to have a war game to look at all this stuff. But anyway, this World Economic Forum website, you have to sign up with your email to get this information to unlock the holy grail of coronavirus response information. But dude, this is on this website, man. Once you unlock this thing, they have a strategic plan for society based on this virus, and they already have it all planned out. And it's like, did they really, anybody really want to believe that these complex systems they want to put in place, that they have planned, that they just came up with this stuff in the last couple of months? Like it is a spider web of information, the different shit that it's all sectors of the economy. They're reinventing society based on this virus. And on this World Economic Forum website, they lay out everything, all the biometrics they want to implement on people to make sure they got their vaccines, the way that the fizzle jizzle technology is going to take over everything. It's crazy, man. Like the detail they go into in these plans just shows you they have already thought this stuff out. They have already, they're 5-10 chess moves ahead of us. You know, while the rest of us are playing checkers, they're game planning and playing chess, figuring out what our next step's going to be. It's the Hegelian dialectic, the problem, reaction, solution. They've already game planned their solution for the problem before the problem even happened, you know, and they already set this stuff out, and they have it on this website, and they want you to believe, oh, this is our response. This is what we came up with as our response. But it's so in depth that there's no possible way that they just came up with this shit the last couple of months as a response to the virus. They had this stuff planned and ready to roll out. And it's here, man. The stuff that I've been reading about for 20 years, all the different steps that the William Coopers and David Ikes were talking about. You know, you go back to their stuff in the 90s where they were writing about this stuff, and it sounded like science fiction. And now you look through it, and every box is ticked. They predicted all of this stuff back in the 90s. You know, so anybody who wants to say, oh, there's no global conspiracy or da-da-da, you really look at this stuff and look at it with a sound objective mind. Like you gotta look at this information and ask yourself, how did they know? How did they know that this technology was going this way? How did they know that they wanted to microchip people? You know, like I've been reading about the microchip for 15 years. Verichip, you know, I was afraid of this technology back when George W. Bush was president. That's because I felt like he was the one that was going to to create the new world order, because that was what his dad's mission was this new world order. And, you know, all the Kissingers of the world and the George H.W. Bushes, they're talking about this new world order 40 fucking years ago, you know? So I was completely ready in 2005 that they were going to start microchipping people. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it took 15 years, but here we are, man. Bill Gates is on mainstream media talking about microchips and quantum tattoos. Like they want to barcode you.
Yeah.
They want to put this technology into your body so you have no choice but to consume the false frequency. They're plugging you into the matrix. That's what they want. They created this matrix to overlay this synthetic layer over society, and now they want to plug everybody into it. And that's how they're going to do it, and they're using this virus as an excuse. Ugh, man, my brain is just dumping information. I'm sorry if I'm not allowing you to talk.
It's all right.
But this is, man, I've been preparing for this for 20 years.
Yeah. So
you know, all this information is just flowing out of my mind because I've just been storing it in my brain because I've been preparing myself. This is what I've been looking at for the last 20 years, ever since 9/11 happened, that something was going on, you know, whatever you want to believe about 9/11, that event, it's the same thing. I feel like 9/11 is the same as this virus in that there's all these rabbit holes for you to chase to distract you. Oh, who did 9/11? It doesn't fucking matter who did 9/11. What matters is what they did with the crisis. And that's the same thing with this virus. It doesn't matter where it came from. It doesn't matter if it was done on purpose or not on purpose. What matters is what they're using the crisis for, the solution. I wrote something on my Facebook the other day that people misinterpreted and didn't understand. It was kind of cryptic, but the problem is never the problem. The problem is the solution. And that's how they've been running society probably since the beginning. They know how to control the psychology of human beings. They know how to control you en masse. They've been using this technique to control society for as long as there's been rulers. They create a problem. They want you to react a certain way so they can present the solution that they've already planned for. And that's what's happening, and the more you delve into this information, the more you see that hidden hand writing this script, Mm-hmm. I go as far back into this stuff as possible, because the evidence of this, force, this conspiracy, I hate using that word because it's been so demonized, but go back to Albert Pike. He was the head of Freemasonry, Scottish Freemasonry, back in the 1890s, wrote 3 scripts for coming world wars that would transform the world the way they wanted it, right? He wrote the 3 scripts. He wrote World War I. They wanted to destroy the Ottoman Empire and the Muslim influence in Europe. And that's what happened out of World War I. They destroyed the Ottoman Empire. And now it's Yugoslavia, Croatia, all these different countries. The Ottoman Empire has been split into all these different countries, right? And the Second World War was to bring about the desire was to bring about a Jewish state in the Middle East, and you look at what happened. It's exactly what happened out of World War II, Israel was created. World War III was the Muslims versus the Christians, so that they could mutually assure destruction of both ideologies. They wanted to destroy the ideologies in the minds of the people. And we're not officially in World War III right now, but you look at ever since the Iraq War, what's happened? They're trying to put these ideologies at each other's throats so that they destroy each other. It's all been planned out, There's another video. This is kind of unrelated to what I was just talking about, but I'm just trying to set the stage for the fact that this stuff has been planned. I saw a clip of Bill Gates in 2005, and he was at a conference. He was talking about vaccines and behavioral modification that can be done with vaccines, and that he was using the case study on Muslim extremists, right? The way that their brain reacts to religious texts, and then he compared it to the way the brain reacts to like a person who's not religious reacts to a religious text. And there's a certain gene, there's a certain reaction in the brain that is basically this gene is muted in people that aren't religious, and it's the gene is I don't want to say dominant, but it's more prevalent in the people who do respond to religious texts a certain way, right? So what he's proposing with this vaccine is that they could mute the gene in religious extremists so that that gene is muted and they have the same reaction as a non-religious person. So it's basically a way to get rid of religious people, is they target this gene in your brain with this vaccine. And just to nobody wants religious extremists. Nobody wants suicide bombers going out and killing themselves because Allah told them they'd get virgins, right? So the backdrop of it seems to be benevolent. They want to get rid of extremists who are going to kill people for their ideology. Yeah. But if you look at the ramifications of behavioral modifications in vaccines, think about that, man. They can modify our behavior with vaccines. And that doesn't just deal with religious extremism. It can target genes in your makeup, your genetic markup. They can target and mute or strengthen genes based on what their desired result. If they find a gene that is prevalent in people like us who are asking questions, who aren't just going to accept things, and they can mute that gene and make us into zombies that don't question anything. You know what I mean? if they have the technology to modify behavior with vaccines, and they're not just going to do it in a way that helps society. They're going to do it in a way that helps society to their benefit. If they don't want religious extremists, they can eliminate them. If they don't want dissidents who are going to stand up to their draconian technology, they'll put a modification in the vaccine for this coronavirus to eliminate that behavior from human biology. And if that isn't fucking scary, I don't know what is, man. They can modify your behavior with vaccines, and they will do it. You know, and that's why I'm telling people, you cannot, under any circumstances, get this vaccine or the microchip, because all it's going to do is it's going to make you a slave. You're going to be a slave biologically and intellectually to this system if you take these things, because that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to turn you off of the natural frequency, the natural light, the natural sound, everything. It's deleting biological reality and creating a synthetic reality that goes over the top of that reality. That's basically like the Matrix. That is what's happening right now. And if we let Bill Gates get away with his behavioral modification and vaccines, it's going to be a world of fucking zombies that just are complacent and acquiesce to whatever draconian shit is coming. It's going to make you not ask any questions and take away your ability to fight back, because it's going to make you docile. And that's what they want. They want a bunch of docile consumers and producers that never ask questions, that just eat their shitty GMO modified food and never ask what the fucking health ramifications are of eating Franken food that's been created in a fucking lab. This is the future, man. It's fucking crazy and it's scary, but if we don't talk about it, I mean, we're going to fall victim to it.
This has been the Dead Rabbit Society podcast.
Thank you, everybody. See you next time.